Kodansha, why can't you let us have nice things? Digital only. Those two simple words can strike so much frustration with manga collectors, especially here in the States, where in comparison to the number of licenses that other countries have, such as Spain or France or of course Japan, we have such a limited amount of manga available in the US, and so many of them from all publishers, like pretty much every publisher that publishes material in English, has a selection that are not available physically, that are only available digitally. But when I talk about this topic, there is definitely one publisher that stands above the rest as far as being notorious for keeping popular titles under digital lock and key, and of course we're talking today about Kodansha. Readers in the US, manga collectors in the US, have unaffectionately called this Kodansha's digital jail, and these are series that just, despite the fact that they are overwhelmingly popular in Japan and other regions of the world, and even are popular in the States because of maybe anime releases, that they are holding on to those digital licenses with all of their life and not releasing these in English for, well, there's actually kind of a reason for it. The reason being because Kodansha in the US is actually the American branch of Kodansha, the publisher in Japan. And essentially whatever the Japanese publisher says goes, and the American publisher has to kind of yield to those decisions. And it's been stated in the past in like interviews and whatnot and articles that Kodansha in Japan holds these licenses for physical release because essentially they don't believe that these titles are going to be successful sales-wise in English if they are released physically, and so they have the English publisher put them out in digital formats only as a test market, and series that succeed in this format will go on to get physical releases. And this has led towards series getting released physically in the past, so it's not an impossibility, it's just not that common, all things considered. But we have, off the top of my head, a few series like Grand Blue Dreaming, Saint Youngmen, and the most recent example being very notable Blue Lock, which all now have physical releases after having started as digital only. And of course there's also the great example of Tokyo Revengers, which was digitally and still is digitally released by Kodansha in English, but the physical license has been picked up by 7 Seas. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 picks for various manga that I would like to see released physically by Kodansha, whether that means getting printed physically by Kodansha, or similar to the case of Tokyo Revengers, maybe we'll see another publisher such as 7 Seas or Yen Press pick up one of these titles. Now real quick, I'm going to mention, before we get into talking about the various manga and the actual subject of the video, my really good friend Colleen, on her channel Colleen's Manga Recommendations, actually covered this exact topic a few weeks ago. And if you watched her video, you might have noted that she did reference me and the fact that I would be coming out with a video of my side, like my take on this same thing, because she typically in her content does go towards the angle of looking at things from the perspective of a shoujo and josei fan, whereas for me, if you're familiar with my content, obviously I come at things more as the shonen and seinen fan. So two sides of the same coin, really, and she made a fantastic video that highlighted a lot of great titles, and she talked at length about why each of those titles deserves to be published in English. Not only did she go over several shoujo and josei titles, but also a couple of seinen that I was not previously familiar with. And in this video, I'm going to be talking mostly about shonen and seinen, but I do touch on a little bit of josei as well, actually covering one series that she already covered in that video. Okay, all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the topic of the video, and I'm going to go through these each in alphabetical order rather than going from like my least most wanted to my most wanted. So with that, we're starting with Ace of the Diamond. As the name suggests, Ace of the Diamond, you can probably guess if you're not familiar with it already, is a baseball manga. And I'm a big fan of sports manga, even though I'm not a big fan of sports in real life, which I think is a pretty popular take for a lot of people. But I don't feel like we have enough baseball manga. Like, the only one off the top of my head that I can think of right now is Mitsuru Adachi's Cross Game, which, by the way, if you haven't read it, is an absolute 10 out of 10 series, highly recommended. But aside from that, I really can't think of any other baseball manga. And while I know that America likes to say that baseball is America's pastime, I think it should be forfeited to Japan, because the people in Japan love baseball. Baseball is Japan's pastime, not America's. This series is a long-running shonen baseball title that has been separated into two series. The first series started, I believe, in 2006 and ran until about 2015 for 47 total volumes. So that's already a lot. But then in 2015, Act 2 started, and that's still ongoing with about 30 volumes right now. So in total, we have almost 80 volumes worth of material for this series that's only ever been licensed physically. And I feel like that's probably one of the big factors that's keeping the license holders from wanting to put it out in the US, because it is a lot of material that they'd have to catch up with. Now, we do have examples, a really prime one being Yaomushi Pedal from Yen Press, where a publisher has decided to play catch up with a really long-running series like that. And I think Yen Press has done a pretty good job with Yaomushi Pedal in releasing those 2-in-1 volumes. They are 40 volumes behind the Japanese release, but they're doing a decent job of keeping pace and trying to catch up at some point without putting volumes out so fast that it becomes a financial burden for anyone who wants to collect the series. But if you, like me, are a fan of sports manga, this is one that I feel like is almost a necessity to be published in English. I would love to see it. The series, if you're not familiar with it, is about a young man who is a pitcher who has a very peculiar way of pitching where his ball will move around erratically and in ways that are not predictable. And it follows his journey as he goes forward through, his league and facing off against other teams and making friends and rivals along the way. Very typical for sports manga. Anyway, so that's Ace of the Diamond. Now we move on to the next series, which is one that is rather notorious with manga collectors in the US, and that is Beck, Mongolian Chop Squad. Now I say that this is notorious because it is well known in the US already, and that's one of the reasons why I think this should get printed physically. It's well known because the anime was released in English, but also because Tokyo Pop actually had licensed the series, and they released roughly the first 12 out of 34 volumes, back in the mid to late 2000s. However, a little bit of a history lesson for Tokyo Pop. Back in 2011 or so, Kodansha actually pulled all of their licenses from Tokyo Pop, which was the majority of their most popular titles, which is kind of what led towards the publisher sinking after having been a giant in the manga industry in the US for about a decade at that point, or longer. I don't remember exactly when they first popped up, but so many of Tokyo Pop's titles were Kodansha titles, and while several of them, like GTO the early years, Rave Master, and Samurai Deeper Kyo, would find homes at other publishers so they could wrap up their runs, there were several that didn't get so lucky, and Beck Mongolian Chop Squad unfortunately was one of those titles. The series itself follows a young 14-year-old boy who happens upon a strange-looking dog, and upon taking the dog to its owner, finds that the owner is in a band, and this starts the young boy's kind of interest and obsession with rock and roll and American rock music and stuff like that. So it follows him throughout his interests and his obsession over this stuff, and his longing to make a career out of this and, have a successful band himself. This series was unavailable in English in its entirety for quite a while, and then a few years ago, Kodansha actually licensed it digitally, and now we have the entirety of it, all 34 volumes, are available to read digitally, to purchase digitally, but we still don't have physical volumes. And this is one that, as I mentioned, it's familiar to a lot of people in English, to the point that I feel as if it's a no-brainer, like it would succeed if they did publish it. And on top of that, the fact that those 12 volumes that do exist go for absolutely just insane prices on the secondhand markets. If you look on Amazon or eBay, the prices are stupid for those 12 volumes, and so they would definitely benefit from printing that stuff and capitalizing on all the people who would love to own it, but also don't want to spend those prices. For example, myself. Anyway, moving on, we get to Blame Academy and so on, and I'm going to say I know that it's pronounced Blam. The series by Tsutomu Nihei is Blam. It's supposed to be like the onomatopoeia for a gunshot, but my American brain sees BLAME, and like many, I read it as Blame, and so for the rest of the video, no due disrespect to Nihei, I'm just going to be saying Blame because that's what I default to. Blame Academy and so on is a spin-off volume of material from Tsutomu Nihei's classic sci-fi manga, Blame. Now, Blame was originally published in English by Tokyo Pop, and then years later, they did publish the whole 10-volume series by Tokyo Pop, by the way, as well as the prequel series Noise. Years later, after Tokyo Pop had lost the license, Vertical picked the series up, and they have republished it across 6 perfect editions, the much larger trim volumes, and they are actually going to be printing a new edition of Noise pretty soon later this year. So we've got all of Blame, we've got Noise, and there's one piece of the puzzle missing essentially as far as Blame goes, and that is Blame Academy and so on. The main feature, as the title suggests, features a kind of a parody of sorts on the original Blame series, but having it take place in a school setting, which is a huge change and a huge juxtaposition off of the actual story if you're familiar with it. But that's not the only thing that exists within that volume. On top of that, there are actually other short stories, other chapters that are canonically part of the Blame story and universe, and I feel like either way, this is something that fans of Blame and fans of Tsutomu Nihei and his works in general would really, really love to add into their collection, and yes, I am talking about myself. I am the people who would love to add that into their collection. Next up, we come to the Josei series that I have on my list, and it is also, like I mentioned, it's the only series that I'm crossing over in talking about when Colleen also already talked about it in her video, and I'm not going to go into depth about the series because, unlike Colleen, I haven't actually read it or watched the anime, though I do actually have the Blu-rays of the anime on the way to me right now, so hopefully within the next month I'll have watched through all of that, and I can also be a huge fan of this series, and that, of course, I'm talking about Chihayafuru. Now, if you want more detail about Chihayafuru, go check out Colleen's video on the same topic, and she's made a ton of videos and content talking about Chihayafuru across her TikTok, and she talks about Chihayafuru on Twitter all the time, so she is a huge fan, and this series is, without a doubt, one of the most well-known and most celebrated Josei titles that exists. And while we do have the English license available digitally, of course, it's part of this video, so we don't have it available physically. However, I do feel like there is a better chance now than there has ever been in the past for us to actually see this get physically printed because of the fact that the series is actually wrapping up, I believe next month as I make this video, it's wrapping up, and it'll be 50 total volumes. Now, 50 volumes is a pretty long series, but it's not nearly as long as 80 volumes. It is doable. I think that they could easily put out a series of 2-in-1 collections, maybe even hardcover collections. A series of 2-in-1 oversized collections would be absolutely beautiful and would be a great way to contain this series across a bunch of volumes that wouldn't take more than maybe 3 or 4 years max to publish, and I think that would be really great. The series itself, I'm not going to try and describe it in too much detail because I don't really understand the game that it's about, but it is a sports manga about a Japanese card game called Karuta, and the main character Chihaya is like she becomes invested in this game because of people in her life, and she wishes to become a professional karate player in Japan. The series, as far as I understand it, mostly from Colleen talking about it, actually led towards a resurgence in popularity of karate in Japan because it was kind of not that big of a thing for a while, and this series really helped bring it back into prominence over there. I would love to see it, and we are, of course, severely lacking in American licenses and English licenses for both shoujo and especially josei manga, so it would be really great to see this one put out in physical editions, whether it be by Kodansha or by another publisher who would do so. Next up, we have something very different from Chihayafuru, and that is Dragon Head, which is a survival horror manga series about a group of students who basically get into a train wreck and have to survive this experience. It was a 10-volume series, and it was completely published in English by Tokyo Pop. However, it is very, very out of print and hard to find, and Kodansha has been holding on to that digital license for quite a while. And this is a series that I feel like is notorious with manga collectors for being one of the most sought after of Tokyo Pop's old licenses, probably because of the fact that it's not that long and it was completed, and it has become rather expensive on the secondhand markets. So this one, I know, like, it's not like the others where it was like only partially published or something. It does technically exist out there in the real world, but I would love to see it published in English. I feel like there's a missed opportunity here because, again, it's only 10 volumes. It's not like it's a super long series. They could put it in 2-in-1s, I guess, if they wanted. They really don't have to, but I would love to see this one re-released in English in maybe nicer editions. And I feel like a lot of people who already have it would probably upgrade anyway, because most people's old Tokyo Pop volumes are pretty worn at this point. Pretty worn, pretty yellowed. Anyway, that's Dragon's Head. Moving on from that one, the next series on the list is part of a rather popular franchise, and one that I grew up with back when I was in high school, and that is GTO Paradise Lost. Now, Paradise Lost is the sequel to Great Teacher Onizuka, which of course was a sequel to Shonan Junai Gumi, which was published in English as GTO The Early Years. The GTO series specifically follows Onizuka, who wants to become a teacher with the goal of hooking up with his students, more or less. However, along the way, he discovers that he actually cares for these kids and wants to be more of a mentor for them, and he tries to protect them from any harmful situations that might befall them. It's a very funny series, definitely not for everyone, but it is very funny, very amusing, and it's a series that, like I said, I grew up with and really loved. And they've published the first series, Shonan Junai Gumi, as GTO The Early Years. They published, of course, GTO, and they also, in this case being Vertical, the others being Tokyo Pop, published the spin-off series 14 Days in Shonan. And while there are a couple of other smaller spin-offs that haven't been released in English yet, I don't even know if they're available digitally at this point, they haven't yet put out physical editions of Paradise Lost, which, according to Toru Fujisawa, the creator of the series, Paradise Lost is meant to be the final piece of the GTO franchise. So it would be really fantastic to have this series available for fans of the franchise to have physically in their collection. However, I'm also going to note here that I feel that whether it be Kodansha or one of the other publishers licensing it physically, we really need to see the GTO series and GTO The Early Years both reprinted. These have been so far out of print for so long, and I've had them because I got them pretty much when the series was coming out, but so many people who got into collecting manga in recent years, or even in the past decade, who missed out when those series were originally being published, so many people like that haven't had the opportunity to get those in their collection, and it's such a classic comedy title that I feel so many people deserve to be able to get it into their collection without spending hundreds of dollars on the sets of this series, or of these series. I haven't actually looked at what the prices go for now. It might be like one of those series that goes for over $1,000 for the whole set. I have no clue. But whatever it is, it's too damn high, and I want people to be able to get these series, and I want Paradise Lost. So that's all I have to say about that. Moving on to the next title. When I was younger, if you told me how good a street racing anime and manga series was, I would probably have laughed in your face and thought that you were either being facetious or just thought that you were stupid. But I found out at a much later age that Initial D is freaking awesome. I never read the Initial D manga, but I watched the anime not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago for the first time, and I immediately fell in love with it. I don't know what pushed me to actually try watching it, but when I did, despite the primitive animation and the really bad CG graphics for the actual automobiles, the series was so good. Like, it's just so exciting, and a lot of it has to do with like the fantastic soundtrack and the way that it pushes forth the action. But it's such a good series, and so I watched the anime and immediately was like, man, I want to get the manga. It was published back in the day by Tokyo Pop, and at that point I realized they only published 33 out of like 48 volumes of the series, leaving 15 volumes never released physically in English. The part that at this point pisses me off is that when I learned that, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to spend, a few $100s buying 30-something volumes of a manga that is not complete. At this point, I would give my left leg to be able to pay the $300 for the 33 volumes of the series, because the prices that it goes for now are just absolutely just not, I'm not okay with them, is what I'm going to say. So I would love to see this classic street racing manga republished in English physically by Kodansha or someone. Put it out there, please. And it's not that long. Like, if they did do 2-in-1 volumes, again, I like pushing on those oversized 2-in-1 volumes because it's a great way for longer series to be released in a more timely manner. But if they put it out in 2-in-1 volumes, it would be like, what, 24 volumes total? That's not bad at all. That's not bad. And it would make so many people, not just me, I know there's so many people that would be happy about this because it has been so hard to find for so long, so out of print, and it would be great to have the entirety of the series. And while I got you, Kodansha, because I know you're watching this, while I've got you, you guys have also been publishing digital editions of, what is it, MF Ghost, the like spin-off that takes place in the same world. Go ahead and give us that physically as well. Like, that's just a little extra pepper that I threw in there. Give us MF Ghost. People will love it. I promise you. Moving on, next up we have Mushi-Shi, which is a little different from everything else on this list because this is the only one that actually was fully published by Kodansha in English, but has been extremely out of print for a very long time, to the point that the 10-volume series, well, technically they put it in 7 volumes and then 1 3-in-1, collecting 8, 9, and 10. But this entire 10-volume series goes for at least $1,000 on like eBay if you look it up. At last I looked, which was not that long ago, those were the prices, which is ludicrous for a bunch of like $12 volumes, and I think the 3-in-1 is like $20 maybe. Anyway, Mushi-Shi is an anthology type of story that follows the main character Ginkgo, which is researching creatures called Mushi, which are kind of supernatural creatures that he is going around researching the Mushi so he can help people who are being experiencing problems caused by them. It's a supernatural series, a very quaint, quiet series as well, and one that is very highly acclaimed. It was animated and released in the US, and it is one that is pretty well known for American English-speaking audiences. But like I mentioned, unfortunately, it's not been available for quite a while. Those 10 volumes are very hard to find at this point. I think that it definitely deserves to be reprinted at this point. I don't know. I would imagine that Kodansha still, because they do have the digital license, it is available digitally like all the rest of these. I would imagine that they still have the physical license of the title, and I feel like it would make sense for them to just put out a new printing. And they're not completely averse to new printings of stuff. I know that this is technically vertical and not Kodansha, but for instance, recently they announced a new 3-in-1 reprint of No Longer Human, the Furuya version of the series, which was originally published by Vertical in 3 volumes, and now they're putting it out into a single omnibus edition. So they're not averse to reprints. Vertical is now a part of Kodansha, so I'm saying Kodansha in general is not against reprints. I'm putting it out there. It's on my list. Again, I know this is something that was originally published by Kodansha. It's not like it was released by Tokyo Pop or it's never been released physically before. Physical editions of this entire series do exist out in the wild with Kodansha's name slapped on the spine. But Kodansha, y'all need to bring this one back because it's painful. It is so painful. Every time I think to myself, maybe today I'll be lucky and find a volume of this for a good price on eBay, and I'm smacked in the face with $1,000+ that I'm like, no, I'm not, no freaking way. Get out of here. Let's move on. Next up we have Space Brothers. This is another long-running, ongoing title. I believe it's over 40 volumes at this point. The series follows a couple of brothers who see a UFO, and this inspires them both to want to go into space. One of them wants to go to the moon, the other one wants to go to Mars. And as they go into adulthood, one of them actually has become an astronaut, the other one has not. And the series kind of follows the second brother's journey to be able to go into space, just like his brother. The series does have an anime adaptation that has been released in English in its entirety by Sentai Filmworks. I actually have the Blu-rays of this series. So it is recognized in English, it is available, it is out there. However, the manga has never, of course, been released physically. It is a longer series. It's not nearly as long as stuff that I've mentioned on this list already, like Ace of the Diamond. I think it's very doable for them to put this out physically. I think that maybe it's one of those things where once it ends, it might become more of a priority because they can schedule out how long the entire thing will take to put out. However, it's a pretty popular series. It's one, I don't see any reason not to put it out there. I don't know, I don't have much more to say about why Space Brothers needs to happen. It seems like a simple ask for me, Kodansha. Just please listen to me and listen to us, because we're begging you at this point. And that brings me around to my final pick. I'm gonna give one honorable mention before I talk about the final pick, and that's Rave Master. This is another one that was released by Tokyo Pop in its entirety, and it had the last 3 volumes released as a 3-in-1 by Kodansha, but it is very out of print, very hard to find. It is, of course, an earlier series by Hiro Mashima, the creator at this point most well known for Fairy Tail, though I prefer it leagues above Fairy Tail. I love Rave Master. I dropped Fairy Tail after like 18 or so volumes. I haven't tried Eden's Zero yet, but I've heard overwhelmingly good things. Rave Master is fantastic. It needs to be available in print. Kodansha, just get something out there. You're gonna make money on this one because of Hiro Mashima's name. But now moving on to my actual last title on this list, and I'm cheating. I'm gonna admit to you, dear audience, that I am cheating here because it's not just one title but a series of spin-offs in relation to one title, and that is basically all of the Shaman King spin-offs. Now, if you'll forgive me, because I don't have all of the spin-offs memorized, I'm gonna look at my computer now. I've got this glow that I'm basking in because my computer screen is down here. So there are multiple Shaman King spin-off titles, and of course, Shaman King more recently has been republished in English by Kodansha after the license moved from Shueisha in Japan to Kodansha. Kodansha in the US also picked it up, and they've been publishing those 3-in-1 volumes, which, while I would prefer them to be oversized, I do think that they're rather nice volumes that really improve on the original translation and make nice adjustments to the artwork and stuff like that. If you didn't have the original Shonen Jump versions, the Kodansha versions are really great ways to experience the title. And also, the Kodansha edition is going to be covering those last 3 volumes, the expanded ending for the series that Hiroyuki Takei gave it later on, that were never released in English. So it's a really great way to have that finale for the series in English for the first time, physically, which is great. However, there's so many spin-off manga of Shaman King, and none of them are available physically. And I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that these, at least some of these, are likely to come out because of the fact that, I don't know, I feel like once maybe those 3-in-1s end, there might be a chance that Kodansha will put these out there. But let's go down the list. So there's Shaman King Zero, Flowers, Marcos, Red Crimson, and Superstar. And there might be more that I just didn't put in here. Many of the spin-offs are actually by Hiroyuki Takei himself, the creator of the main series, and they're not terribly long either. I actually have that information. Shaman King Zero is collected across 2 volumes and is a series of one-shot chapters detailing the backstories of Yo and other characters from the original series. I feel like that one's pretty much a given to release physically. Flowers has a total of 6 volumes, and that follows the adventures of, spoiler alert if you haven't read the end of the series, be warned, Yo's daughter, Hana Asakura. And then the Superstar is currently ongoing and has 5 volumes at this time. When we have Red Crimson, which has 4 volumes, and it features artwork from Jet Kusamura. This spin-off focuses on the Ren family and Horohoro as they deal with a conflict with Red Crimson. And then Marcos is an ongoing with 2 volumes, at least at the time that I wrote these notes, which was months ago, so they might be out of date. But at the time I was making these notes, the Superstar was 5 volumes and ongoing. Marcos had 2 volumes that was ongoing. Focuses on the X-Laws and their missing captain, Marcos. The series also has artwork by Jet Kusamura. So those are the kind of brief descriptions of each of those spin-offs. I feel as if the new editions of Shaman King have been successful enough that it would make sense for them to release these other ones physically, but come on, it would be so cool to see those, especially the ones that are actually by Takei himself. I would love to see printed physically so I can put those on the shelf with my other Shaman King manga. So that's the list. Those are the 10 titles and 1 honorable mention. Technically, I honorably mentioned reprinting GTO as well, so whatever. But those are the titles that I would love to see released physically that are stuck behind these digital bars by Kodansha. I obviously love collecting manga physically, and I have a hard time often reading digitally because I just find it hard to focus on my phone, computer, or tablet screen when there's so many other things that I can like get access to on that device. And so that's why I largely prefer to read my stuff physically. And in a lot of cases, I don't read digital releases before I read physical releases like some people do. So I would really, really love to see all of these put out there. And in the case of the ones that I mentioned for reprints, for stuff that I already have, like GTO and Rave Master, I love accessibility for things. I hate, like, exclusivity of things that have gone out of print. Like, I don't find myself feeling as if I'm like, ooh, yeah, I have these rare and hard to get books that other people can't enjoy. Like, no, like, yeah, it's cool every once in a while for someone to be like, oh my gosh, how did you get those books? And then I'm just like, I happened to have been collecting when they were available and being published. So I would love to see things reprinted because I love to see the excitement of other fans who find that something they've been interested in is all of a sudden going to be available for them to purchase without either having to do years of hunting to find it at a good price or just giving in and paying way too much for a bunch of paper with pictures printed on it. So those are my picks, and I want to know what yours are. What Kodansha titles that are currently only available digitally would you like to see printed? If I didn't mention something, obviously I was going with a lot of these were more popular ones, so there's a lot of stuff that they have that's only available digitally that I'm just not familiar with. So I would love to hear y'all's takes and y'all's suggestions on what should be published physically that they have locked away digital only. Sound off in the comments down below. Thank you so much though for watching this video, for spending the time with me and hearing me out here. And I'm gonna mention Colleen again in her video. If you would like to see the same topic, however, from the perspective of someone who's more into shoujo and josei and talks more on shoujo and josei titles, check out her video. I linked it in the description, so you can go find it and have fun with that, and give her a follow if you haven't already, because she's a fantastic creator and a fantastic person as well. And if you haven't yet followed my channel and you're sitting here watching this and enjoying the content that I produce, please give me a follow and hit the bell so you're notified every time I put out new content. And if you wouldn't mind, hit the like button, that thumbs up, because it does something positive for the algorithm. Anyway, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I will see you all on the next one. Peace out.